So this is a link to the today's item pool. I hope you can see the first question. It's going to be the same every day in every lecture. Thank you for starting the recording. I really forget about it. Uh, okay, and make sure that at the place of your name, all of you type your roll number. Okay, I have got 2 responses till now, waiting for others. Okay, only 1, 2, 3, 7 responses. So I'll go ahead as soon as I get at least 40 responses, since I think it's a class of 84 people. Out of which 58 are here. Where are your remaining friends? Any idea? Okay, there is some conference. It's starting today. Okay, no issues. How many of you heard the news that you might be returning to the campus soon? How many of you are happy about it? You can always type a +1 or -1 to whatever I say in the chat window. And I'll take +1 for agree, -1 for disagree. Okay. I'm sorry, just a second. Okay, most of you are happy about it. Yeah, exams will be offline too. Okay, so let's get started. This is the agenda of today's lecture. As I told you, it's going to be slightly mathematically oriented. I'll ask you to do some calculations, so normal mathematics calculation, something you would have learned in your 5th or 6th standard. We'll talk about the organization of random access memory. Can someone summarize what is random access memory? What is the difference between when I say simply a memory and when I say a random access memory? Feel free to type in the chat window, take your time. Then we'll talk about the CPU cycle. So till now, what we have understood about the hardware is that CPU has these different kind of circuits, which can be adders, subtractors, even multipliers made up of multiple adders, and they can do the computation. But we were concerned about from where do they get the input, where does the output go, and how does the CPU know which circuit should it activate. So CPU cycle gives the answer to that, and we'll talk about a bit about memory hierarchy. So these things will become clear as we move further in the lecture. This was where we were in the last lecture. We were talking about a latch. So a latch can hold 1 bit of memory, and then when I asked you what exactly is which electrical circuit is the one which can remember things, many of you said it was flip-flop and registers. So registers are nothing when you pack multiple latches together. So you can actually combine these latches to make registers. So a latch can hold 1 bit of data. So I can combine 10 latches together. I can make a 10-bit register which can hold 10 bits of data, or I can make a 20-bit register which can hold 20 bits of data, so on and so forth. Now let's talk a bit about memory. So whenever I talk about in memory, the data is stored in the form of cells. We call these the memory cells. So you can say like a cell is analogous to a latch, or it can hold 1 bit of data. Then you can combine these cells together. You can combine multiple cells together. That's when we say it has become a register. But in memory, we don't really use the term register. We use the term word. So in memory, multiple cells, they combine together to form a word. And that's how you store the data in memory. So let's say I put 10 cells together, right? So I can put 10 bits here and I can store those 10 bits here, and I say that it's one memory word. Now, can all of you look at your systems and tell me what is the size of memory word in your system? And how would you tell me that? Any idea? Anyone? Okay, so can you quickly check your systems, look at the settings and tell me whether your system is a 32-bit system or a 64-bit system. You can type it in the chat window. Okay, 64, 64, 64. For most of you it's 64. For me also it's 64. Now all of you have a 64-bit system. What does that mean? That means that this 64-bit is the size of one memory word in your system. So if I talk about any one particular word in your memory, it is made up of these 64 bits. Okay, right? And I have many words like these. So I do not have just one word. After this, I'll be having another word. It will also be of 64 bits. One more word, it's also of 64 bits. I do not know how many such words I have. I have a lot of such words. Okay. Now, can you quickly again look at your system and tell me the size of RAM in your system? Okay, 7.9 GB. So I'll take it to be 8 GBs. 8 GB, 4 GB, 16 GB. Let me check in my system also quickly. Okay, so for me also it's 8 GB. Okay, so for most of us it is 8 GB, some of us had 12 GB, some of us have 16 GB, and whatever calculations I'm going to do next, you can do it depending on what is the size of RAM in your system. So I say that I have a total of 8 GB RAM. Okay. Based on it, can you tell me now how many words I have in the memory? And there you will need a paper and pen. So one word size is 64 bits and my total memory is 8 GB. So how many words do I have in the memory? Take your time and you can put your answer in the chat window. You can give your answer in 2 to the power. Okay, so here Saket says 12 GB. Saket, can you tell me how much is it in powers of 2? So its unit cannot be in GB, right? It won't have any unit. So I'm asking you how many words are there in the memory. So it's just a number. It won't be having any units. So it's like if I divide 8 miles by 4 miles, the answer will be simply a number. It won't have any unit. Okay, Yuvraj says 2 to the power 11. Any other answer? Make sure you properly convert the units. So when I say GB, this one is bytes here, this one is bits here. So make sure you convert bytes to bits and do all those things. So I want you to compute it for 8 gigabytes where every cell is 64 bits. Let me write the question down. So each memory word is of 64 bits. The size of my memory is 8 gigabytes. How many words are I don't see any right answer as of now. Keep trying. 2 to the power 36. Okay, Abhinav, I take it to be 2 to the power 32. 10 to the power 9, 2 to the power 33. Okay, any more answers? 2 to the power 27. Okay, anyone who is confident of their answer, can you explain it to us? Any of you can go ahead. You can even share your screen if you have a iPad or computer in front of you and tell us step by step how did you compute it. I'm getting all the complicated answers here. 1.25 into 10 to the power 8. Mihika says 2 to the power 27. Mihika, you are almost there. Just a small calculation. So that bytes to bits thing, take care of that. And then can you recompute it? 2 to the power 30. Here comes the correct answer. Shravya. Okay. It's actually a pretty straightforward computation, right? So this is the total size of RAM I have. This is the size of one word. So I want to see how many words are there. So what I have to do, just divide it. So this is what, 8 gigabytes divided by 64 bits. Let me do it on another page. So I have 8 gigabytes divided by 64 bits. So let's quickly convert these gigabytes to bits. So does it become 8? Can I write it as 8 into 2 to the power 3 bytes, right? Sorry, 2 to the power 3 gigabits or something like that. Or a better way is to do, let's first convert this giga. So how many bytes are there in 1 gigabyte? So 1 gigabyte has close to 2 to the power 10 kilobytes, sorry, megabytes, right? And then 1 megabyte has close to 2 to the power 10 kilobytes, and 1 kilobyte has close to 2 to the power 10 bytes. So this is this much bytes, and then you convert it into bits. So again, to do that, 1 byte is 8 bits. I just write a 8 here. These many bits divided by 64 bits. These things cancel out. Bits also cancels out. So I get 2 to the power 30. Perfect. So these many words are there in my memory. 2 to the power 30 words. Now, I want you to do one more calculation here. Before doing that calculation, can you all tell me how does a memory address look like in your system? So you can quickly write a very simple C program, something like this. You can declare a variable int I equals to 10 and just try to look at its address. So you can do printf %p address of I. Can you quickly execute this program and paste the output in the chat window? We are trying to put the entire picture together and we're trying to see what is happening here with the memory. Okay, for Anand, it's quite a big address. I think these are 16 hexadecimal digits. Okay, what about others? Still waiting for others. Shouldn't take this much time. I hope you haven't forgotten writing a program in C. Okay, okay. So for most of you, it's a 16-digit hexadecimal number. Still waiting. Okay, sorry. So there was a power outage. Okay, now look at my screen, and this is what we have come up till now. So I have seen that I have a 64-bit operating system. There's one problem with iPad. Yes, so each of my memory word is of 64 bits. And then we have also, looking at the size of our memory, which was 8 GB, we realize that there are 2 to the power 30 such words. Now, can you tell me, so if I give each of these words an address, and you can start addressing them from 0. So I can say that this first word here, its address is 0. For the second word, its address is 1. For the third word, we cannot have an address of 2, right? Can we have? Since we are doing most of the things in binary. So here, as we see, if you look at all of your addresses, they are in hexadecimal. So whenever you have to address a particular memory word, which we also say a memory location, we actually go by these hexadecimal numbers. So I can actually go ahead and say it's a 2 because 2 is valid in hexadecimal. Then I can say 3, so on and so forth. I can go up to F. After F, what next? It should become 1 0 and then 1 1, 1 2. So this is the kind of addressing I am going to use to address such words. Now, based on it, can you tell me what should be the size of this address here? So see, if I was having only 2 words, so a size of 1 would have been sufficient, right? First word I would have addressed it as 0. Second word I could address it as 1. If I had only, let's say, 15 words or 16 words, then also it would have been easy. So I could go from all the way up to 0 to F. In that case also only one digit would be sufficient, one address digit would be sufficient. But as soon as I start having, let's say, 20 such words, so I need to have one more bit. So the question is, given that there are 2 to the power 30 such words, can you compute what should be the size of address in hexadecimal digits? If the question is not clear to you, I'll repeat it. This is the next question on item pool, and I expect you to solve this problem. If anything is not clear in the problem, you can ask me. I'll repeat the question again. So the only question is, how many digits do I need for addressing these words? So assume that this is a city and these are the houses in the city. You are numbering these houses. So you say this is house number 0, this is house number 1, this is house number 2. So on and so forth. You can go up to house number 500. But the problem is, for giving address to these houses, I am using hexadecimal number system. So the question is, how many digits do I require in this address? In decimal, it's pretty straightforward, right? If I have 100 houses, so I require only 2 digits because I can address it like house number 0, house number 1, house number 2, up to house number 99. So 2 digits would be sufficient for 100 houses. Okay, Vignesh says 10. Take your time, no hurry. And remember that it's in hexadecimal. So I'm going to put this question on item pool, coming like the next question. Okay, it's there. You can go and answer this question on the item pool. Meanwhile, I'll keep explaining it for those who haven't got the question yet, right? So if we were doing it in decimal for 100 houses, 2 digits would be sufficient. If I had 1,000 houses, 3 digits would be sufficient. If I had 10,000 houses, 4 digits would be sufficient. But now the problem is we are not using decimal number system. I'm using an hexadecimal number system. So can you accordingly compute and tell me what should be the size of address? Okay, some of you say 8, some of you say 16. So let me put it like what should be the minimum number of digits, because at maximum you can go anywhere. So if I have 100 houses, definitely 2 digits would suffice, but I can definitely have a 10-digit address. So looking at the minimum, what should I do? Many of you have already given the correct answer in the chat window. Okay, still waiting for at least 10 responses, then I'll move forward. Got only 6 answers till now. I'll keep the... Okay, no, I have got many. Like 41 people have given the same answer. I'm yet to see what is that answer. I'm hoping that's a correct one. Okay. So if you look at my system, this is the output which I get when I print the address of a variable. My system is also a 64-bit system and it has 8 GB of RAM. So the correct answer is 8. With some computation, you will get it. So you actually need at least 8 hexadecimal digits to represent 2 raised to the power 30 words. If you go like 1 digit down, if you take 7 hexadecimal digits, you won't be able to access 2 raised to the power 30 such words. Right? And then in many of your system, you actually see that this address is actually 16 hexadecimal digits.
Hello.
Hello?
Ma'am, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
So, don't mind me interrupting. Can you do us a small favor? So
Tell me.
we just joined your class from the conference, and what you just said, though, you came up with the answer 8, and it sounds extremely confusing to us, at least to me. Could you just explain it once, just once more? Sorry.
I haven't explained it even once. I was hoping you would do that computation on your own. Okay, let's do that. So it's actually straightforward. So let me put it like this. Let's say there are 2 to the power 30 houses in a city. That is the number of words I have in a memory, right? And I am using a hexadecimal number system to label each of these houses. So now let me put it like this. Let me say this is the number of digits in hexadecimal number, and you tell me how many houses can I label out of it. So let me say number of houses I can label. Now you tell me, if I have one hexadecimal digit, how many houses can I label?
16.
16, right? So I can go from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 up to F. 16. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I take two hexadecimal digits. How many houses can I label?
256.
Okay, 256, and in easy terms I can say 16 to the power 2, right?
So we're trying to calculate what 16 power x is equal to 2 power 30, and we want x now. Is that what we're doing?
That is what we are doing, but if you do it that way, it will result in a problem.
Oh no, I'm just saying the
You are
math part
correct.
of
You are correct. We are trying
it.
to do that. So I'm trying to compute here what is the value of x, so that 16 to the power x becomes equal to 2 to the power 30. Can you compute x from here? The problem here is, let's simplify it further. So let me write it as 2 to the power 4. See, you see a problem right here itself. What should I write here? Right? So this number 2 to the power 30, I cannot express it in 16 to the power something, right?
Yes, ma'am.
What can I express if I was having something like, let's say 2 to the power 28? Can I express it in parts of 16?
Yes, ma'am.
So it's 2 to the power 4 to the power 7, right? Correct?
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
So here we got the value of x to be 7. So the point is, if the value of x is 7, how many houses can you address? It's actually 2 to the power 28. But we want 2 to the power 30. Right?
So one more.
So I have to increase it by one more. So now when I take it, the value of x to actually be 8, it actually goes and it can addresses 2 to the power 32 houses. And that is sufficient for me. Right? I wanted to address 2 to the power 28. Now I can address 2 to the power 32. So the point is, some of the addresses which I can generate will actually not exist in my memory. Those houses won't be there, but I need at least 8 digits to address these many number of houses. Is it clear now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Good. So this is some certain computations, how your memory works, how you can map your memory addresses to the size of your memory to your word size. Now coming back from technicalities, let's go a bit further. So
Also, ma'am,
yes,
just clarifying, 2 power 30 came because you have a 8 GB RAM and you have 64-bit word. So you did that. That division results in 2 power 30, and now for 2 power 30, we're calculating how many hexadecimal digits we need to address it in the memory.
yes, that's correct.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. I'll try to provide you some slides or notes of it so that the big picture becomes clear here. So the idea was, we knew what is the size of each memory word here. It was 64 bits. I knew I have total 8 gigabytes of memory. So we sort of divided it and figured out how many words we have in memory. The division gave us, I have 2 to the power 30 words. And then we looked at how many hexadecimal digits do we require to address these 2 raised to the power 30 words. So for most of the computations and for most of the courses, you visualize your main memory something like this. So you know that there are these addresses, And just for the ease of convenience here, they are written in the decimal number system. So we were using hexadecimal, that's how we do that, and computer actually converts them into binary. So these are the addresses, and each of these addresses have some data. So here it is 8-bit of data, but all of us have seen that in our computer systems, each of these location, it has 64 bits of data. So for all the theoretical purpose and for the sake of understanding, we actually visualize RAM as this linear sort of data, as this linear combination where you have the data here, but in actual real life world, your RAM, it is organized as something like this. So you have a grid of memory cells, and you have these multiplexer wires which are running around here and there, and whenever you have an address, the right wires get activated on the multiplexer, and that's how you can select the right cells in the memory, how you have to access them at the level of digital circuits. Okay, coming back to the point from where we started. So we actually came here when we were talking about the circuits which were doing computations in the processors, and then we were asking from where are the circuits getting their data and where is the data going, and then one of you answered that it gets its data from memory and then it gives its data back to the memory. So we came to the memory, we looked at the memory, how it looks like, and now you can fetch data from this memory by activating the relevant wires on the multiplexer. So you don't have to care about that, operating system does it for you. So you just have to give the address from which memory location you want the data and you'll get it. Okay, so this is a small diagram of how your arithmetic and logical unit of CPU looks like. So this is the logic, this is the unit which is responsible for doing all those computations for you, which has all those circuits which we were talking about, which do computation for you. Now, going a step further, now let's say this is the place in my CPU where I have all the circuits. So I have some circuits here and there. I'll be having some adders, some subtractors, some multipliers. Each of the circuits will be having some input and some outputs. Right? And then we were saying that these inputs, they come from memory, these outputs, they go back to the memory. We'll look at that in a while. Is that true or not? And then the idea is we have this memory sitting here, which we are going to visualize as words, how we talk now. So each memory word can be 64 bits and there is some data stored in each of these bits, some 64-bit data, something like that, right? Now the question is how CPU performs its work. Again, the question is still there. How does it get the data and how does it know which circuit it should activate? So the answer to that is CPU works in certain cycles. Can any one of you tell me what are the 3 steps of that cycle? I'm sure all of you would be knowing that.
Fetch, decode, execute.
Exactly. So it is fetch, decode, execute. And let's see how CPU does this. So fetch means, as the name implies, fetch the data or get the data, and data as well as the instructions. So what this fetch cycle will do, so CPU has certain registers. Now can one of you name different kind of registers which are there in the CPU? Register again means a circuit which can hold some data. So CPU has some small registers inside it which can hold some data. So you see CPU also has some kind of storage in form of registers. So let me make that as a separate unit here. So CPU has some registers. Can you name some general registers in the CPU? You would have studied in your computer architecture course.
Instruction register, memory address register.
Instruction register, memory address register, more?
Ma'am, memory data register.
Memory data register.
Program counter.
Come again.
Accumulator.
Okay, accumulator. And I don't remember some of these. What else? There are some general purpose registers also, right?
A program counter.
A program counter, yes. And then there are some general purpose registers. So these are the registers with the help of which CPU does its work. So as you can see, I have a memory address register here, and I have an instruction register here, memory data register, and all those things. Now can you guess what is happening here? So CPU performs its work. So this fetch cycle, it actually requires some of these registers to have some data here. So as an example, your memory address register. So as the name implies, it is holding some memory address. So let's say there is some memory address in this register, and so it will be linked to some memory here. Let's say it's linked to this address. This address is present in the memory address register. And then you have a program counter. So program counter sort of tells me, so let us say you have written a C program. You have just one line in that C program, but when you convert it into your machine level instructions, it might be 100 lines, and all those 100 lines will be stored somewhere here in the memory. So these are the 100 lines of your C program, and now the CPU, it has to execute that C program with the help of all these circuits. So CPU is going to make use of all these registers. So initially your program counter is 0 or 1, I do not exactly know. So let's say it is 1 when you are at the first instruction. So when you are first instruction, this is your memory address register. It will hold the address of the very first instruction here. And do you know what these instructions look like? So let's not talk in machine level language. Assembly language is something which comes very close to this machine language. Can you tell me a few instructions in assembly language, how they look like?
There will be an instruction, there will be an address for the instruction, and there will be the location of where to find the location of the register from where to find the address.
Okay. So let me clarify my question. Have you heard of some very simple assembly language instructions? How assembly language program looks like? Can you tell me some of the instructions from there?
Add, jump when equal to.
Jump. Okay.
Move.
Load. I can have something like load A.
Add.
Load A, load B, add, right? Jump is even at this point of time at a higher level for us. Let me say store. Let's say I have this assembly language program, and I hope all of you understand by looking at it what I'm going to do. What I'm trying to do, I'm trying to load two variables, I'm trying to add them, and then I'm trying to store the result. So that is how your assembly language instructions look like. By the time they are in memory, they are converted into fully machine level language. And the same program might look something like this. So assume that one word is 8 bits for now, just for simplicity. We know that it is 64 bits in our system. It might look something like this. So this load A can be something like this, 10111100. Load B can be 10111101. Add will be having, let's say, 1110. Store, let's say, 1101, 1111. So just like that, I have converted into some machine language. So what it is telling me, so you look at this memory location, right? It is telling me two things. So the first thing here is the instruction I have, right? So this 1011 is the instruction, 1100 is the data, and this is where your memory address register is pointing to. So it will get your data and put it in the instruction register. So you'll have this 1011 1100 in the instruction register. And now comes the work of another unit of CPU. What is pending? What all does CPU has? So we have one arithmetic and logical unit. We have storage. What is left? What is left? CPU has two things, right? One is arithmetic and logical unit. What is the other?
Encoders and decoders.
Encoders and decoders, okay. And they are present somewhere. What that unit is called? Control unit.
Control unit.
Yes. So control unit is still there. So now it is the job of control unit to understand what is happening here. So when control unit sees it's 1011, so control unit understands that yes, I have to load some data, and to load this data I should go to memory, because the second thing here it is telling me so that you have to go to this memory location and you have to fetch the value of A. Now you go to this address 1100, fetch the value of that particular value or that particular variable, whatever that is. You bring it back and you put it in one of the general purpose registers. Assume that that value was 2. So you have a 2 sitting here in the first general purpose register. Your program counter gets increased by 1. You go to the second instruction, right? So your first instruction, it is fetched. So it was fetched when you brought it in the instruction register. It is decoded by the encoders and decoders present in your control unit. So they know what this instruction means after you decode it. And when you execute it, execute means now you execute it, you go to that particular memory location and you fetch the data. So that thing is done. So when this entire cycle is executed for the first time, your first variable, this instruction gets executed and your data comes, it's loaded, A is loaded, it comes and sits in one of your general purpose register. Similarly, this cycle executes once again, fetch, decode, execute. For this second memory location now, your program counter would have incremented by 1. Instruction registers contents will change, and now this second variable B will come from the memory. It will sit in second general purpose register, which is 3 maybe for now. And then you have this third instruction, which is add. And now when you fetch this third instruction, which is add, this is the time when control unit looks at it and then it realizes that I have to add something. Now I need an adder, and maybe you can put the enable line for the adder. So adder is now going to take the values from these two general purpose registers, add it and give it back to you. So let's say there was adder. So from where it is reading the data? Adder is not reading the data from the memory, right? This adder is reading the data from these general purpose registers. Now that's a different story, that you have loaded these general purpose registers from memory. And then adder gives back the data. And where will this data go? Not to the memory, right? It will still go to another general purpose register, which can be one of these registers. It can be a separate registers. And when your last instruction store A will be executed, then you will go and put this data back in memory. So now my question is, why this much of hocus pocus? Why we have so many registers sitting inside the CPU? So I'm first getting the data from memory, putting it in a general purpose register, getting second data, putting it in general purpose register, computing something, putting it back in another general purpose register, and then it goes back in memory. Why not take stuff directly from memory and put it back to memory? Why to have these registers here?
Any leakage?
Leakage? Okay. What kind of leakage? I'm assuming my
Overriding.
Overriding. Okay. Any other reason? Maybe something gets overridden here. Any other reason? Anyone else? Couldn't hear. You can type in the chat window. Unable to hear properly. Okay. So the answer of this question is similar to, assume that you are making a dish at your home, and then what's the CPU going to be there? Let's say your stove is the CPU there. So that is the place where you are going to cook everything, right? And then here is the fridge. So it has all sorts of vegetables in your fridge, right? And then whenever you have to cook something, let's say your stove is kept at some table, a big table. So whenever you have to cook something, you assume that this fridge has all your chopped vegetables, right? Not even raw vegetables. So whenever you have to cook something, you get all these chopped vegetables here, right? Whatever you have to cook. So assume that I'm going to make potato beans. So I'll get my potatoes here, I'll get my beans here, and then I'll cook them. I'm asking a similar question to you. So this is the CPU here, this is the memory here. So asking the same question here, what I'm asking you, why are you bringing this potato and beans and keeping it on this table? Why not directly take them from fridge and use them? Getting my question? So assume that there are 5 vegetables which I need to put in my dish. So I can one by one get them from fridge and then, cook them. But what we generally do, whatever vegetables we have to use, we get them from the fridge and we keep it to a table which is close to the stove so that we can easily cook. They are easily reachable, right? So it
Accessibility.
will be accessibility, exactly. Easy for access. So that's the same thing here. So every time you going to fridge and getting I was about to say getting a data, but getting a vegetable, it's going to be cumbersome. Then you need another vegetable, you again go back. You need third vegetable, you again go back. So it's easy that you bring all these vegetables and keep it right near to your stove. So that is what exactly the CPU is doing. So in access to RAM, it takes more time. CPU registers, they are sitting right inside the CPU. So for these encoders, decoders, adders, getting this data from the CPU registers is very fast, as opposed to if you get them from memory every time. So that is one of the reasons why we have these registers here and why we store all the things first in this register and then add them rather than directly taking them from the memory. Okay, we are almost on time. So I'll finish with a very small question. It's not graded. So all of you need to just think about it. So I have told you what all happens in the fetch, decode and execute phases of CPU. Fetch, you fetch the instructions from memory. Decode, you decode that particular instruction. What does that mean? And if it requires you to get some data, get that from the memory. In execute instruction, you use execute phase, you use your adder, subtractor and whatever circuits are there to perform the computation. So my next question to you, which of these phases do you think is the fastest? So you can answer it on the answer pool. I'll finish my lecture with this question and I'll take it up from here in the next lecture. Maybe you can Google it later on, but you can answer it now. So which of these phases is the fastest? Fetch, decode or execute? And if you know the answer for sure, then think about what can be the problem now. So given that you know that for executing any instruction, your CPU does these 3 things, fetch, decode and execute. Given that some of these phases are slow, some of these phases are fast, what kind of a problem can it lead to? Okay, we'll finish the lecture here. If you have answered, you can go back, maybe you can Google a bit about it or prepare for the next class. If any of you have doubts, you can stay back and ask.